On an early spring Sunday, volunteers pulled tangles of paper and plastic from a river near Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Near a narrow band of water where trash accumulates, they gather together to celebrate World Water Day. Sarah Tuševljak helped organize the river cleanup.
When I think of my childhood, the most striking memories are those created on the Kazandolska River with my friends. We pretended to be Tarzan. We used to jump to the other side of the river and run into it.
A 24-year-old law student, Tuševljak shares her fondness for the Kazandolska with her friends and family. A few days earlier at a nearby restaurant, they swapped childhood memories of life along the river. But for this community, trash is not the only threat to a river they've cherished since childhood. For years, they have fought against the construction of 3 small dams along the Kazandolska. In 2016, investors, including a company from Belgium, constructed the first dam. As workers dynamited hills to make way for access roads, the activists say construction ruined previously untouched canyons and forests. In 2020, when the start of construction on the second dam was announced, they decided to organize. They filed a lawsuit against the investors and then compiled a petition to protest the dam's construction.
We also held a protest here in 2021 to express our anger over the inaction of local authorities and the members of the city assembly to rule on our petition's demand to stop the construction of dams along the Kazandolska.
It took almost 2 years, but in late 2021, judges revoked the environmental permits for the 3 small dams. It was a huge victory for the then 23-year-old law student and her group of friends. When U.S. Aid Administrator Samantha Power visited Bosnia earlier this year, she stopped to meet the Kazandolska River activists and celebrate their success. But the fight isn't over. The investors have sued Sarah Tuševljak for defamation. And last summer, as workers stopped construction on the second dam, she received a threat at her family's house near the river.
I found a nail hammered to the lock of our front door. I was very scared. That fear inspired a rush of negative thoughts, and I wondered if I could bring this fight to an end.
In Bosnia, investors have built almost 120 small dams and plan to build at least 350 more. They say these dams will benefit the country's struggling economy and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. But activists counter that these small dams are not green energy, that they will destroy aquatic ecosystems, ruin surrounding forests, and dry out riverbeds. Fights against small dams in Bosnia have become so frequent that activists, including Sarah Tuševljak, have formed a national network, the Coalition for the Protection of Rivers. In the early spring, she joined coalition members from 30 community groups from across the country at the Buna Channel, a narrow waterway in southern Bosnia that is millions of years old. After 2 years of separation because of the pandemic, she gathered with fellow activists in person for a strategy and public relations event.
First, we had a meeting with the Coalition for the Protection of Rivers. Then we gave statements to the media, and then we cleaned the Buna Channel.
The coalition's unity, which spans geography and ethnicity, is remarkable in a nation that has remained deeply divided since the end of a war and genocide. In 1992, Bosnia declared independence from Yugoslavia, but its Serb community refused to join the new multi-ethnic country. Conflict soon erupted between Bosnia's 3 main ethnic groups: Muslim Bosniaks, Catholic Croats, and Orthodox Serbs, culminating in a genocide. 100,000 people died, of which 80% were Muslim Bosniaks. After it took years for NATO to intervene, politicians negotiated a fragile peace agreement known as the Dayton Accords, which divided the country into 2, the Serb-majority Republika Srpska and the Bosniak-Croat-majority Federation. 30 years later, memories of war remain, and hopes for integration are unfulfilled.
Ever since the end of the war, people are very much divided and also very tired. So it's not often that they come together to fight for something that belongs to them.
Lejla Kusturica is a key organizer in the Coalition for the Protection of Rivers.
Our politicians are constantly fueling nationalism among people. I like to stress out that ordinary people in Bosnia and Herzegovina are perfectly capable of living together.
Sarah Tuševljak's community outside Sarajevo is virtually entirely Serb. Here, near the Buna Channel, Bosniaks and Croats are the majority, However, all three ethnicities have banded together for what they call a fight for the life or death of their precious rivers.
These are the last free-flowing, wild, drinkable rivers in Europe, and that they need to be preserved precisely because of that. Bosnia has over 240 rivers. Our villages were built around rivers. People really depend on the water for livestock, for production of vegetables, fruits, for their animals, for their life.
Sanel Rajanovic is also a member of the coalition, an ecology professor. He has investigated how small dams impact freshwater ecosystems.
Those projects, they are devastating for the ecosystems, particularly aquatic ecosystems. If the river dries up, even for a short time, that actually destroys all the animals that live in a river.
The majority of small dams in Bosnia pass rivers through tubes, drying out portions of the riverbeds. According to Rajanovic, this spells disaster for species that can only be found in certain Bosnian streams, brooks, and creeks.
This is soft-mouthed trout, the species that will be possibly extinct if they build mini hydropowers.
The threat to species like the soft-mouthed trout is what prompted Rajanovic to not only research Bosnia's rivers, but to protect them.
It's my responsibility to protect fish or soft-mouthed trout through passing on the knowledge on my students, on the local community, and raising awareness about this fish species, which can be gone in the next few years if we don't do something urgently.
Professor Rajanovic's university is in Mostar, a city that remains deeply divided both culturally and geographically. The Neretva River divides the city between Bosniaks and Croats. Rajanovic is a Bosniak. At the Buna Channel, only a few miles south of Mostar, he has joined forces with Oliver Arapovic, a Croat. In 2016, an investor submitted plans to build 2 small dams along the channel. After a years-long fight, activists prompted the government to stop the construction of both dams.
War didn't bring anything good to anyone. Normal people don't have any prejudice towards each other.
The fight to preserve Bosnia's rivers dates back to 2006. When the country aligned its energy policy to that of the European Union as part of its post-war membership bid. Afterwards, Bosnia pledged to reduce its reliance on coal. So the Bosnian government introduced subsidies for hydropower projects. Government money made small dams attractive for investors and politicians, who persuaded locals of their benefits.
They said the small hydro was going to change their local communities for better. Several years later, people started realizing that the rivers were just disappearing. The forest was disappearing. And they realized that they were sold lies.
In response, a national movement erupted, and protests broke out across Bosnia. In 2017, the police violently confronted protesters in a small village as they blocked the only bridge to where investors planned to construct a small dam. Years later, other communities in Bosnia have had to continue to fight.
We are born and raised here, basically on the banks of this river, and we simply feel it as a part of ourselves.
Ermin Hondo, a 29-year-old who works in tech, lives in Konjic, a small Bosniak or Muslim-majority city. As a child, he drove with his family every summer to the Neretva, a river on which a public electricity company wants to construct a significant network of 15 dams.
Right now we are going to Butrović Polje. That's the largest village that is close to River Neretva. A lot of people will complain about the state, about the political situation and stuff, but I think that 95% of people living in Bosnia is proud to be living in such a beautiful country.
For 4 generations, Hondo's family has owned a plot of land on the Neretva's banks. His father, who recently passed away, built a vacation house along the river with the intention of passing it on to Hondo.
I cannot think of any bigger dream for myself than to make the same for my kids, for my children.
To preserve the river that neighbors his family's vacation home, Hondo has banded together with activists young and old.
Here in this area, we have a lot of agriculture on which we depend, so we need water, and our lives depend on this river.
Ibrahim Turk, a farmer who lives less than 2 miles from the Neretva, is the president of this group of activists from neighboring villages, which goes by Let Me Flow. In June 2021, he joined hundreds of other community members and a well-known Bosnian band to prevent construction on one of the 15 planned small dams on the Neretvica.
At this place, on this bridge, people gathered and stood their ground waiting for the machines to come. We let them get to a certain point, just to tell them they can't go any further.
The workers demanded to pass, but the activists, including double amputee Safet Saralic, blocked the road.
They started coming at me, and I didn't let them through. My wheelchair was stronger than their machines.
That day, Turek and Saralic prevailed, and just a few months later, the courts canceled the electricity company's construction rights, once activists discovered that the small dams did not have energy permits. Now they're fighting the investors in court.
They see that people here are quite prepared to do everything that's needed to defend the river. And I think that right now momentum is on our side.
Despite the activist wins, bringing small dams to Bosnia's rivers remains a deeply desirable plan for some investors, including Edhem Bicakcic, a former prime minister of Bosnia who was pushed out of power after corruption charges. He has a degree in engineering and once led one of Bosnia's public electricity companies. Now he owns a private renewable energy business that specializes in the construction and design of wind farms, solar energy plants, and dams. His company has helped construct or design 55 small dams so far in Bosnia.
The potential Bosnia and Herzegovina has in water, sun, and wind is an opportunity for development. And the construction of a large number of facilities for renewable energy is a chance that Bosnia and Herzegovina should use.
Bicakcic admits some small dams are improperly, even illegally constructed. Still, he feels criticism from abroad, including from the U.S. ambassador in Bosnia for small dams planned on the Neretvica, is equivalent to discouraging development in a nation still scarred by war.
This should help because it strengthens the economy of Bosnia and Herzegovina and develops sustainable businesses. And it strengthens the basis that is necessary here and needed to accord with European standards.
Activists argue that the electricity produced by small dams is minuscule compared to the power generated through solar or wind energy. For years, they lobbied for a law that suspends the ability of investors to receive energy permits for small dams. This summer, and one of the largest victories yet for the river activists, politicians passed the legislation, which effectively outlaws small dams in a significant portion of Bosnia.
I think that this is nonsense and stupidity, and if I could choose, I would get rid of the government that proposed it. I think no further comment is needed.
Because of these activist efforts, the Buna Channel and other waterways in Bosnia still run free. And on its banks is where Tushevlak and her friends, Turek and Saralic, Rajanovic and Arapovic, all representing different ethnicities and communities around the country, strategize for next steps in their fight against the spread of small dams. In a country rife with corruption, they know that even the most recent law that suspends the construction of dams along many of Bosnia's rivers can be outmaneuvered. As the meeting pushed into the late afternoon, they then worked together to pull plastic from bushes, pluck styrofoam from the ground, and roll discarded tires to the trash, hoping to preserve the Buna Channel and all of Bosnia's rivers for generations to come.